Not change tonight. With that, I'll keep this up because I anticipate going back to it at some point. I'd like to introduce Lynn Preheim, legal counsel for GMD5. And Lynn, if you have any other comments you'd like to provide.
I don't. I'm here to help Warren and the board answer the questions that you all have. So as they come up, I'll be happy to do it. Yes, Daryl.
Yeah, you need to talk about WCA and how we're trying to draft that. So these quantities, will be a 5-year quantity, and how you can move them from well to well.
Sure. WCAs, water conservation areas. Water conservation areas are voluntary agreements between the producer, the water user, and the chief engineer directly. No middleman in between. We are not saying you can't do WCA. We encourage you to do the WCA. What does that do for you? One, it documents your conservation. It gives you a proof that no one can refute at some point in the future that you've done your part to conserve. 2, potentially can provide flexibility, allow you to move water around within that WCA area. 3, it's a direct conversation with you and the chief engineer. What you negotiate with the chief engineer is exactly what you get. You achieve these goals on your terms and how you want to do it, with the flexibilities that you want. You'll notice the LEMA does not have very many flexibilities built into it. Why? We want the WCA to be that vehicle to provide that extra flexibility so that you can do it on your terms and get credit for that conservation at the same time. However, I always hate to say however means a WCA, for it to go into effect, has to be as stringent as whatever restrictions are within the area. So if you're within the LEMA area, you must meet or exceed the restrictions that are imposed by that LEMA. If it's within the IGUCA area, you must meet or exceed the restrictions imposed within the IGUCA area. Okay? So for the WCA to take effect, you have to have the same or better total conservation throughout that region as what the LEMA would be doing. And if you want flexibility, you have to beat it. You have to go a little deeper. Okay? But WCA is a very good tool to be flexibly using your water on your terms. We absolutely. It doesn't give a whole lot of press time in our document, but we are promoting them 100%. Anything else? Did I get that there?
Yeah.
Fred?
Maybe a little clarification. You alluded to indents a couple times and almost left it like it was optional. And everybody needs to understand that it's not an option.
Correct. Thank you, Fred, for clarifying. It's always good when your name of committee corrects you. That's good. End guns required removed January 1, 2019, if it's put into effect in 2018. Period. We don't start the clock counting until 2020. So 2019, there's a little bit of grace period. Not much. If you're found to be operating within the end gun, even in that first 2019 year, then there are stiff repercussions for that within this LEMA draft. Okay? We want you to be looking at those penalties as well. Be mindful about what could happen if you don't follow the other portions of the LEMA document. Be mindful of that, because they would carry the force and effect of the LEMA plan as well, as an order. So yes, end guns are required to come off immediately with the LEMA draft. Jump in, man.
Okay.
Is this working? I want to add just a little bit of background to this. One of the things that your LEMA group has had to deal with and the board's had to deal with is really a couple of different competing aspects. One is we always have to consider first in time, first in right, that all of you are aware of. You understand the concept of it. You got a lower number, you're in higher priority. The other is the impairment statute and the filing of an impairment claim by the service. those two things compete with each other in some ways. And they both have to be evaluated when we're trying to craft a solution that works for everybody. So you might have a high priority number, but be right next to an area that is a high contributing factor to the impairment. So that's different than somebody that's a high priority number that's a long ways away from the stream and doesn't really contribute much to the impairment. So we have to figure out how to balance all those problems when we're doing this. And then so those are the two elements of the law that are in play that we had to work with. One is the impairment statute, the other is first in time, first in right, and the priorities that all of you have in your water rights. There was a third component that we have to work with, and that's DWR, because the chief engineer at the end of the day has to approve any LEMA proposal that comes out of GMD5. So those three things are the things that we really have to deal with. And as Oren's already told you, DWR has given us fairly specific information about what it is that we have to do, what we have to meet. 210 is the 210,000 acre feet is the number that this basin can sustain and meet the requirements that DWR is placing on us. So that is where that 210,000 number comes from. So priority is a relatively easy issue to deal with. Everybody knows what your numbers are and you know where they fit in the priority scheme. The impairment side, what wells contribute to the problems that the service is alleging in this impairment complaint, that's a much tougher thing to deal with. And the way that we dealt with that is with the most scientific process that we could come up with. We did the best we could using the best science, using the top of the line modeling group in Blue Groundwater. And Blue came up with a 7-layer model that you guys have heard about before, and it's as scientific as we can get in order to make a determination about what a relative well contributes to the impairment. So that's the way we're trying to do this in a scientific way because there's no other way. One of the things that you'll see here, and I'm going to try to address maybe some questions that you all might have before you ask them so I can eliminate some of the discussion and make it flow a little better, is why we're cutting off at 90%. So anything that's a 10% contribution to the impairment or less is not included in the Lehman proposal. There's a reason for that, and the reason simply is that a couple of things. One is no model is entirely perfect, and you can't get 100% perfection in a scientific model like this without drilling a bajillion wells and figuring out exactly what every structure and formation in the basin is and all of that. It's just not possible. So everybody has a recognition that it's not perfect. And as a consequence, those that have small contributions to the impairment, it's a recognition that we can't be that sure. So that's one reason. The other reason is it's within the margin of error. You've got errors built into this whole thing, and 10% is easily within the margin of error. So that's why the committee ultimately decided to use 90% and below. So that's the reason for that. Another thing about the science, and one of the things that we've looked at carefully, and I think is being considered right now, just so you all know, is changing the boundaries of the LEMA that we've been discussing up to this point and that are currently reflected in your package today. There are areas in the Rattlesnake Creek Basin that have a 10% or lower, water rights that have a 10% or lower contribution. If you were going to justify that 90%, 10% differential, it hardly makes sense to keep wells that have less than a 10% contribution that are still in the Rattlesnake Creek Basin in the mix. So we're considering redrawing the boundary lines so that it won't include those 10% or less wells. So that's one of the things that's in discussion in the next draft of this proposal. So hopefully that addresses some of the concerns that some of you may have had about why, if you're going to do it scientifically, let's do it scientifically, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So hopefully that's a helpful intro to the questions that all of you may have. And Orin's still back here. Am I forgetting anything, Orin?
Yeah, real quick, technical clarification. We're not saying you have more impact to the Zenith gauge than you do to the North or South Fork, Penobscot, or the Arc. We're not saying that at all. All we're saying is that at the point in time where we modeled out to, 68 years into the future, if you're in the 10% zone, 10% of the water that you are using within that 68 years, 10% of that water would otherwise have impacted Zenith gauge. The cone of depression would reach out by the end of that 68 years. Not at year 1, not at year 2, 68 years. 10%.
Assuming the model is 100% perfect, that's what it means.
Correct. Correct. And so we had folks that, like Landon said, that were in the 0 to 10 that were still within the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin. Well, originally in 2007, in August of last year, we put them in because they've historically been in the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin. But then you have folks that are very near Quivira that have the same model impact on Zenith gauge that are very near Quivira. They're exempt because they don't happen to be living and having that water right sitting within the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin historically. So why are you hitting the guys that are 0 to 10 within the Rattlesnake Creek if you're exempting the folks that are closer to Zenith gauge but having the same impact? So that's the reason for the restriction and revision to be 10% or greater only. Okay? Yeah. Questions? I'm sure there are a bunch. Kevin?
So if you're gonna change the boundaries, is that 2010 number going to be adjusted, or are you gonna change the percentages on the wells and all that?
That's an or question, and the answer is yes.
It's an awesome question. You're picking up on all the things that we have to do. So you're right, 210 has to change because it's based on the inclusion of those. They're now going to be excluded, so we're going to have to adjust a little bit.
But it's still our goal that the percentages are going to be very similar. Likely they're not, because the distribution of priorities, distribution of where the wells are at, are going to change. And so the percentages are likely to change. We're trying to minimize those so that we're not shifting dramatically between drafts. We don't want to put a number out there and drastically change. We're trying to keep those as close as we can. But 210, that number will be modified because that is based on the previous boundary area. I know there are more. This is going to be a shorter meeting if you guys will chime in.
When will a new map be drawn?
Very, very soon. The new map will be Zone A only.
Repeat the question.
Sure. When will that new boundary be available? It'll be Zone A, 10% or greater. What we can do is I anticipate, I was hoping to have it done today, but today happened and it didn't happen. I was hoping that today we all have that map on our website tonight. It's not there. My goal is to have that up there tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it'll be very, very soon. It's my point. Okay? We're not going to try and say, oh, in 3 weeks' time it'll be up there. No, I'm going to get back to the office and that'll be one of the things we post. A quick plug for our website. Hopefully you guys have been to our website recently. According to the stats you have, we've completely redesigned our website with the effort to be more transparent. We have put all of the LEMA documents, comments, feedback we've received so far, the correspondence back and forth between the state and the G&D, Audubon Society, WaterPath, those are all posted to our website. please take time. I know it's a big time sink at the wrong time of year, but please take time and take a look. We want you to be fully informed about what we're doing, because if you're not informed in what we're doing and why, it makes this plan weak. We want this to be a very strong plan that the stakeholders support, that it has a good legal and technical basis. Okay, so please take a look at the website. But yes, I'm hoping to have that updated on the website soon.
Couple other comments. Redrawing the map is the easy part. The harder part is doing what this gentleman just asked about, where we recompute how that changes the numbers, because it's not going to be 210,000 acre feet anymore. It's going to change a little bit, which means that we have to recalculate what the differential is that DWRs require and all of that. That'll take a little bit longer. We have Baloo working on it, and so we should be getting that information really quickly. They promised it. They promised it to us quickly, so hopefully that'll come soon. The other thing I forgot to mention, I did talk about briefly the balance between priority rights and impairment. We are also doing some revisions that give more consideration to the actual impairment. So if a well is impairing more, and it's a higher percentage impairment, it's going to get adjusted. So basically, we have to balance those two things, the priority and the impairment, and cross those lines someplace where you give consideration to the impairment and you give consideration to the priority, and then figure out what makes sense and what's the most fair. I can tell you that just preliminarily, priority is always going to get the most weight just because it has to under our water law. But impairment also matters. You can't ignore the fact that the whole reason that we're here is because of the impairment complaint. We wouldn't be talking about Alina if it wasn't for the services impairment complaint. So we have to deal with it. So I just thought I'd clarify that as well.
There's been some talk in the past of how the service measures their water, and it might be inaccurate.
Speak up. The air conditioner came on.
There's been some talk in the past of how the service measures their water at the maximum zenith gauge, and that it might be not adequate. Does everybody feel that, how are we going to measure this? We're putting a lot of weight, and I've heard some talk at some board meetings that those measurement devices maybe aren't as good as they should be.
The question was, has there been consideration for the measurement devices in the way that the service has measured their flow for their water item, in essence? Point of clarification, you mentioned zenith and Maxwell gauges. Those are not measuring devices for Quivira at all. They are purely used by the state and federal service for measurement and records for how that stream flows over time. We want Quivira, please don't crucify me, the folks from Quivira here. We want Quivira to have the same accuracy of meter that you, the producer, have, period. They do not have the same type of diversion system that you do. That's a fact. We want Quivira to, if possible, manage the water to the best of their ability with minimal losses and inefficiencies. I think we can all agree with that. I think they would agree with that. There are some factual issues that preclude that, unfortunately. I have no problem as district manager working with Quivira to identify those to help make that better for them. In the Lima plan, there's I think one line item, probably page 3 or 4. It talks about recreation use and how they are considered in this Lima plan. All it says is we want to work with each recreational user to identify where they can make their own water use better and more efficient. Okay, that includes Quivira. That includes every other recreational water right within the Lima boundary. We want that to be the same. We're not trying to hold it differently. We understand there's some things that they can and can't do based on the way that they use water. But personally, I'd argue maybe there's some issues that we could be better. Hopefully. I know I didn't answer your question fully, but all I'm trying to convey is that we want them to be held to the same standard for a water meter that you are as a water user for irrigation. Same. Yeah.
The augmentation, oh, go ahead.
Can I stop just a second? I want to expand on that just a little bit. From the very beginning, we have always pushed DWR to encourage the service to have better ability to track what they're actually receiving, and we begged and begged for that. DWR has told us that they are going to try to get that accomplished with the service. It's, you know, to the extent that we're having to provide water to them, it's only fair that they measure it accurately. I mean, that seems common sense to me, and I don't see how it can't be common sense to the service and everybody else in this room. So trust me when I tell you, we're pressing. We have asked for a plan from the service that has been apparently in the works for longer than our Lima draft has, and still don't have one. So I don't know where DWR is on this, but I can tell you that at every turn we're pressing the service to be fair about this too, so that they actually measure the water that they receive. If we're having to go to all this expense to give it to them, they better accurately measure it.
How do they know they're impaired if they don't know what they receive?
Yeah.
That is a fine question for Mr. Barfield. The question was, how do they know that they're impaired if they haven't been accurately measuring the water that they've been receiving? And that is part of why we have been challenging the impairment in the first place, and we don't necessarily agree with the impairment, but a fact of life is that Barfield has told us that there's an impairment report, and he's presented it to us, and he said, this is what we're going to do. And so we have tried to persuade them about a number of different issues, and there is a kind of a line in the sand where we haven't been able to move them any farther, and this is what we have to do. And that's where we are. The board has constantly been in communication with David Barfield and his staff. They've been, you know, listening to us. They've been reasonable to work with on a professional level, but there are certain places that they're not willing to change. And that's one of them. They're saying they're impaired. Another example is we have to provide the water in the quantities they want at a time of year they want. In other words, they've given us some kind of a seasonal requirement that Mr. Barfield has said he is going to require us to meet. Well, our choices are to let Barfield do a strict administration where he just starts cutting junior water rights and pretty soon everybody's out of business and just furious, or we can try to accommodate it in this fashion, and the board has decided that the best option is to try to make something work. So that's why we're here. Yes, sir.
I thought they had an annual permit just like the rest of us and not a monthly permit.
That's the argument we've used with Mr. Barfield constantly. This is an annual permit like everybody else uses, and his response is always, yeah, but you need it when you water corn. It's not that you use it in January or whatever. We made the argument. We made it and made it till it blew in the face. And he's not receptive. He said, no, I am going to force you to meet their seasonal requests. Sure.
Has the legalities of a Lima, has that line been crossed where the chief engineer has put too much input into the Lima? Because as I understand Kansas water law, that's against the law.
So the Lima statutes basically say that it is a program that is offered by us as a membership in the GMD5, but at the end of the day, it turns into a chief engineer's order. And he has to make certain findings in connection with that order, that it's in public interest and some other specific criteria. Basically what he said to us is you can propose whatever you want, but if you don't meet these particular criteria, I'm not going to sign off on it, and you won't have a Lima, and I'm going to turn to strict administration and cause you to have to do all these other things. So that's the position we've been placed in. But the arguments you're raising are the same ones we've argued for 2 years plus now.
Okay, augmentation.
Yes, sir.
2 points. Where's the money come from, and what's the latest in terms of the location?
Augmentation, where are you, or how are you planning to pay for it? first question. And then where are you proposing to put it? On the first point, there we go. First point, how do we pay for it? We don't know what it's gonna cost yet. We do not have a price tag for it. So how can you say we need to raise this much money if we don't know what this much money is? There are mechanisms that we can pursue within the GMB Act that allow us to do some special assessments. That's an option. Is it on the table? Sure. Are private grants on the table? Absolutely. Are there other options? Sure. Are they on the table? Absolutely. Are they quantified? No. Because we don't have a price. You don't know how to go to a bank and ask for money until you know how much you need. And that, unfortunately, that's just going to take some time to clarify that. As far as location, this is our proposed well field location. Does not mean it's final. There will be site-specific testing. There will be analysis by the independent engineering firm that does the well field design, that does the pipeline design, to make sure that it's done right. That it's not going to deteriorate that area. You know, I grew up in Stafford County too. I don't want to see a specific part of this county that I call home, that you call home, to be deteriorated, period. I'm right there with you. Okay, this well field is what Blue Groundwater used to make its projections for a 15 CFS well field that meets the requirements by Kansas law today. That's what they were charged to do. Find a well field that is not impaired, that does not get too close to senior water right holders, that does not exceed state field. Find an area that does that. This is the area that checked off all those boxes, but it's not final.
And one other factor is sustainable isn't going to keep declining. It's somewhere we can take the water and not have continuing declines.
High impact area, how many wells are in that? And then are there zones within that high impact area?
High impact area. How many are in it is the first question. And then second question, are there zones within the high impact area? First answer, I don't have that number off the top of my head. If you asked me an hour ago, I would have pulled it back. I could have had it. I meant to. I don't have that number off the top of my head. The second one, are there zones within the high impact area? Today, no. Does that mean that's true tomorrow? No. Everything's on the table because we're balancing priority, we're balancing response to the stream, and so it's going to be going back to the whole mantra of don't put anybody out of business and trying to maintain those percentages as close as we can to where they're at now. Okay, we're going to try and keep that balance. Does that mean we add some zones, some priority areas, some response to stream zones? Possibly, I don't know. Right now, I don't believe we're really looking at that, but it doesn't mean that we're not. Okay, I know that it's not a great answer, but it's what I got. Okay. Greg, you have a question?
I beat a dead horse, but I have a couple of questions when you brought up I'm going to go back to the time when Rivera filed the impairment. The way I read up there, that's the Rattlesnake Basin, is that correct? That's what's written up there? Is that right? Okay. 1971, I came with my dad and we filed over there for a water right. It's the South Fork of the Minnesota, 4 miles from it. And that water basin we were told we were in by the people at that time in the state office. How did I become part of the Rattlesnake Basin? Who authorized that? What changed?
Yeah, so the Rattlesnake Basin is based on surface water analysis, not groundwater analysis. So what happens is, just because the surface water behaves in a certain way, doesn't mean that the groundwater beneath behaves exactly the same. That's why the basin boundaries aren't necessarily completely aligned.
We had a big rain in July of this year. We had one of, I think, the 5th largest flood in the Minnesota crack. All the water in our area went to the Minnesota.
Off the surface. Off the surface, that's my point. So what surface drainage is isn't necessarily the same as the ground.
But you didn't explain why I was in the south part of Minnesota and now also I'm in the Madison
Okay.
basin.
Well, what changed is we went from the impairment phase of identifying how much we verify their impairment. They filed it on the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin and the junior users within that subbasin.
Right.
Fact. Chief engineer in his investigation had to go with blinders on to identify the junior water users within the Rattlesnake Creek subbasin that were impaired and quantify how much. When you shift from investigation and the final report to finding a remedy, is when you shift from who actually has impact. And that's where we see these, look real close, these are the surface drainage basins. That's the boundary between Rattlesnake Creek and North Fork Minnesota, and the same on the north side up here toward the Arkansas. When identifying those that have impact, that's when we asked the modelers, who has an impact? They said after 68 years, these folks, and there's a response map that's floating around, it's on our website, it's on the KDA's website, that identifies exactly who has impact, all the way down to zero. As Lynn was articulating earlier, the model's not perfect down to zero, but we have confidence, high confidence at the 10% level. Okay? So those folks have been identified in order to find the folks that have impact on zenith gauge as having 10% or greater. And so that immediately went beyond the surface drainage basin boundaries to those that have a groundwater impact on zenith gauge of 10% or greater after 68 years. Does not mean that your well down here, right, it's right down there, I understand, does not mean that your well down here or up here does not have 90% of impact to the other, going the other way. We're not saying that at all. We're specifying how much impact does your well at your location have on zenith gauge after 68 years. Is it 10% or greater? Yes, no. If it's a yes, you're in the Lima. If it's a no, we're considering dropping it out.
You talk about redrawing the boundaries. Are you going to make it bigger or
Nope.
shrink it?
Look, it'll be shrunk. Look real close, you can see this line is kind of jagged through here, then it becomes kind of wavy. That is the surface drainage basin boundary here and there as well. Same up there. What we're talking about is it'll be restricted to a zone that is 10% or greater, and it does reach out to here, and it does reach up to here. But it does go all the way out and still grab North and South Fork Minnesota and the Arkansas River subbasins. But because of groundwater impact, not surface water.
When I was at the meeting you had before though, I talked to the big Wiz company different, and I asked him a question, and he said I had very little, no impact on the rattlesnake, but I did have impact on the Minnesota.
Sure. If you were to put those two in the basket, you would have more impact on the Minnesota than you do on the rattlesnake. All we're saying is that you have 10% or greater on the rattlesnake. Who determines it?
Yes. Yeah. If he didn't know.
Our modelers have determined it. And KDA is determined.
Okay, so
Yes.
you're gonna use another model?
No, it's the blue groundwater model. It's the exact same model.
For the river?
Albuquerque, yes.
I think
No, he's from Albuquerque. Okay.
On the WCA, right now, we can't cross basins, correct? Okay, we include wells from numerous basins.
Question was, on a WCA today, can those wells be transferred across the surface drainage basin boundaries? Is that correct? Okay. I will say this for WCAs. They are case-by-case basis. We do not have one in this area. We've not had one. So how the state would determine how, yes or no on that, that's not our saying. Okay? I'll be honest, it's not us. That is a direct negotiation between the user and the state in Manhattan. My gut is if the local source of supply is still found to be the same, the answer will be yes, you can. That's my gut, based on some conversations we've had with them. That's my gut. That's as good as you're gonna get. That's all I can do. Okay?
Or for my observation, there is still no water measurement around St. Mary's going into the salt. The meters I see is the water that leaves in the soil. Can you explain how they determine that 15,000 acre feet?
Sure.
They disperse that out with some kind of plan.
Sure. And I'm going to defer some of these questions to KDA because that was right there, bailiwick, when it was done. But sure. Quivira's water right is 14,632 acre feet of water annually. That is their certified acre feet today. The question that Leon had, how is it diverted? Because his understanding was that there's zero metering as the Rattlesnake Creek dumps into Little Salt Marsh. The only metering is after that. Okay. We're going to roll back 30 plus years. Little Salt Marsh can be used legally by Quivira staff as storage of water throughout the year. They have legal authority to bring that water and store it in Little Salt Marsh. Then they have the ability to divert that water off at 3 locations along Rattlesnake Creek as it moves and meanders through their boundaries. The sum quantity from those 3 points of diversion, historically, and I'm going to have to be careful here, when they perfected it on that finding of inspection report, I forget what FIR stands for. At any rate, when they perfected that water right, they perfected it saying that 10,100 and change acre feet was diverted from those diversions throughout their boundary. Approximately 2,500 was, sorry, 1,500 was accounted for storage in Little Salt Marsh. How much water they could store there. Then the remaining 2,500, obviously I'm rounding here, so don't hold me to all these numbers. 2,500 is for evaporation of Little Salt Marsh. Okay? We've had questions about this. Linda's talking about various points. We keep going back and forth with the state on it. This is another one of the metering and monitoring of the water use at Quivira. Annually, Quivira does a good job of reporting how much water they divert. They do. Using the meters they have installed today. Storage evaporation. It's still a question. Is it something that we're getting answered today? Probably not today. Is it something we're continuing to pursue? Absolutely. Because again, if we're going to be delivering water to Little Salt Marsh, we want to make sure that what we're delivering is needed and that they're going to be putting it to beneficial use and not letting it sit there and evaporate off throughout 6 months. That also goes to why we're conceding to a point being able to deliver water when they need it. Because if we deliver water in January when they don't need it, it's going to sit there throughout the spring and early summer and evaporate off when they don't need it. Okay, so we're willing to concede that to a point to allow them to request water when they need it, so it's not being put to, that it is put to beneficial use. Does that make sense? I can't speak to that entirely. I fully understand. The comment was that a large quantity of water routinely or from time to time spills across that spillway as it leaves Little Salt Marsh and it's not metered. I don't have an answer for that. We're not policing their meter. That's irony here, folks. It's a surface diversion. We're a groundwater diversion. We're a groundwater management district. We're not a surface management district. And there's a separation of responsibilities there, that lies 100% in KDA DWR's realm.
But, yeah, but one of the problems is what you raised. So all of what he said is true, but the problem is that we're being required to deliver it in a surface water fashion. So we want to make sure that we're not delivering water that's bypassing them or that, you know, they're not going to use and they don't need and so on. So that's one of the things that we tried to address with DWR and one of the things we tried to address with the service, that we want accurate metering. We want this to be so that we know what we're giving them and what they're using and what they're not using so that we can be accurate. So your point is absolutely correct. We've been raising this issue again for 2 years.
Wouldn't it make a lot more sense just to put the augmentation wells on the refuge?
Sure. Sure. Doesn't it make more sense to put the wells and pipelines directly on refuge property? You're not going to get an argument from me. The folks in the row behind you might have an argument for you.
We've asked the service for that option. We've also asked the service to, for the ability to deliver the water exactly where they need it, when they need it, by piping across the refuge, so that there's no waste of water through evaporation and the like. If they want it in this pond on this time of the year, by golly, we'll give it to them. It would require less use of the water in the end, less water, because we're putting them where they want it, when they want it. But so far, that has not been permissible to the service.
It looks to me like that augmentation well field normally bypasses the water there. I'm wondering, where else are you looking for a well field, and where are you going to be studying for an augmentation field?
Sure. The question was, it looks like this water normally would have gone on beyond the refuge. Why are you picking that area and not somewhere else? Right? I paraphrased closely under that area. In our modeling work, I say our, we're looking at water at our request. We asked them, where's this water coming from? Who's it impacting? This water will be capturing water that is moving adjacent to Rattlesnake Creek, moving easterly. Okay? Toward the eastward. We are capturing that water as it comes across. Okay? There are no senior water users that are downstream from us, from this proposed wellfield area. Domestics, there's some domestics. Stock water, there's some stock waters. We're keeping an eye on those too. But this water has been modeled to be coming from here. So it is Rattlesnake Creek water moving east that we are capturing and then rediverting back north to Rattlesnake Creek channel. Where else have we looked? We have looked at a well field here north of St. John, adjacent to Rattlesnake Creek on either side. As you get closer, we've looked at wells here, we've looked at wells up here, we've looked at wells all the way through there. Various reasons why they're discounted. Further away, water quality gets better. Sure it does. But the problem is you're investing so much more into pipeline that it becomes unfeasible. If you deliver that water to the Rattlesnake Creek channel there, you lose the majority of it to infiltration into the channel or evaporation. So you're not being efficient with your delivery of the water. What about here? Or here? Well, there are other issues with that too. Water quality is the big one. Water quality, as it goes west to east, gets progressively worse, naturally. Okay? We need, again, remember one of the criteria points we need to try and meet is quality for this augmentation field, not just quantity. So delivering water that is better than what they normally get is detrimental, just as detrimental as delivering water that is too salty for them to use. So we need to try and match the natural. And so that's why a well field very near where we're delivering is optimal. Okay? Believe me, we've looked at a bunch of them. Doesn't mean that there may not be some others located over time as we're starting to go into our site-specific studies. But right now, this is where we're proposing. I know that puts a bit of a bullseye right on your back, Mary Ann.
The question was asked in a previous meeting, how come they didn't accept augmentation standalone? and I never got an answer.
Well, why, go ahead.
Okay, so we have always believed as a GMD5 that augmentation would remedy the problem by itself, no change. DWR has told us repeatedly that they will not accept a proposal that is only augmentation, that it also has to address stream flow to some degree and cuts to some degree. And
Did they give you a reason why?
Yeah, not really. I mean, we believe that if the goal, I guess let's just put it out there, if the goal is to solve the impairment, we have a proposal that can solve the impairment with augmentation and doesn't require any of this other stuff. But again, David Barfield has very clearly said, no, I'm not signing off on it, I won't do it, and we've tried. We would love it. I think that would be the best solution for all of you, and it wouldn't require cuts, and why are we addressing stream flow? But it's just one of those things that we haven't been given any alternative.
It seems like to me with Alima, everybody in this room needs to understand that Alima is us as a collective group given our water of our free will, because through the board, we are giving our water up to appease the chief engineer. Be very clear about that. Be careful what you agree to. Do your research. You know, this kind of gets the chief engineer off the hook because we're solving all his problems. And he doesn't have to do anything really but sit and smile like he normally does, because your taxpayer money is paying all the attorney bills.
And that, the problem is, as a group, you know, the choice that you have is appeasing him or letting him do strict administration, which is just brutal, and nobody in this room can do it. So it's one of those deals where, you know, at the end of the day, the board and your group, your membership has to say, okay, what's the lesser of two evils? What choices have we been given here? And that's kind of where we're at. A follow-on to what Orrin was saying about water quality, they don't want perfect water. They don't want high-quality water at the refuge. They need water within a certain range or it doesn't meet the requirements. So add that to the list of things you've heard about that we're trying to accomplish all at the same time. We've got to deal with quality. We've got to deal with quantity. We've got to deal with, you know, all of these various things, the various aspects of the legal requirements, all trying to meet this goal. So trust me when I tell you, this board and the Lima Committee has spent hundreds, thousands of hours trying to get through all of this in a way that is fair and equitable and doesn't put people out of business, and at the same time, you know, does its best to fight back about things that we just can't, you know, just don't make sense, but we don't have any choice about. So.
Yes,
When you were answering one of Shane's questions
you're
earlier,
gonna have to yell more.
when you answered one of Shane's questions earlier, you said that you had challenged the impairment complaint. I have asked that question for 6 months and gotten the answer no from everybody. So answer that, and why did, when the order came down from chief engineer, why was it not challenged at that point?
Challenge is, in the legal sense of the word, where we filed a proceeding to challenge the finding of impairment, we did not and never have. What I was talking about in the way of challenges is we have contested some of the factors that went into it. For example, the 14,632 water right doesn't seem accurate, doesn't seem fair
And
or
what was
right.
the answer that you got?
That's their water right, it's approved, there's nothing we can do about it. One other thing that we looked at in connection with that particular question is the year of perfection is 74. I'm sorry, what, 80?
57 and 87, 30 years apart.
30 years apart, so they waited 30 years to perfect it in a year of great rainfall and record rainfalls. So the year of perfection was horrible for us. if you invalidate the year of perfection, they have a 10-year window that you've got to look back to find a different year of perfection. Well, the problem is there was another year in that 10-year period that was almost the same as the 10,000 or the 14,000 number. So it wasn't going to benefit it very much, even if we won the argument. That was one of the problems. You know, the chief engineer's attitude has always been, that's an order, it's been perfected properly, and we couldn't find some of the documentation that didn't get an extension for perfections and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we weren't going to gain much. It was going to still be very near the 14,632 number that they have. So it didn't make sense to do it from that perspective. So those are the kind of things that we looked at, and at the end of the day, determined that the challenge wasn't going to gain very much.
Gotcha, perspective.
So compared water allotment is basically 5,000 acre feet a year.
Right.
Is Quivira's water allotment about 5,000 acre feet a year? Is that what they want?
They are authorized 14,632, 14,000 acre feet.
The amount of the impairment as found by the chief engineer to that 14,000 number was between 3,000 and 5,000.
So why do they want to cut us 210,000 when they say we shortened the whole lot to 14,000?
Because, and this goes back to one of the things that we've been fighting about, in order to, one of the things the chief engineer has required is a decrease in the decline of stream flow in Rattlesnake Creek. And he's requiring us to do a 50% reduction in that decline. And in order to accomplish that under the model, using the current boundaries of this lien, it requires us to only use 210,000 acre feet on average per year. Yes, sir.
The Rattlesnake Creek was a pump. They let the pump get dirty. They got to rework stuff to let the street go together. They let the trees come and everything else to take the water. They got to take care of the water. There's nothing to do that.
The answer is, we don't know. We've asked for a management plan that we haven't seen. But again, that doesn't change their water rights. So how they use the water is beyond our ability to dictate.
Yes. Additionally, I will give U.S. Fish and Wildlife credit, and their partners program specifically. If you live in this area, you've probably heard about some grants over the last 3 or 4 years, specifically for that reason, to pull the invasive species of trees, the phreatophytes that are in there, salt cedar, Russian olive, to get those pulled out. They've already done that work within their boundaries over the last, I don't know how many years, several years. They've done that work in-house. Now they're reaching out through various grant proposals to clean up the stream with private landowners, to pay the private landowners to get those trees out of the stream corridor in the headwaters as it moves toward their boundary. So, while we don't have direct impact, and we've been arguing that for a long time, arguably also, they've been doing their own housekeeping and to try and pull those trees out internally, and now they're looking upstream as well. So, you know, I don't give credit a whole lot of time, but that's one point I would give credit for.
Let me follow up on the service. I mean, we're not giving up hope in our discussions with the service. We still want to work with them and hopefully can find a better solution. For example, you know, one of the things we talked about earlier was a delivery directly onto the property. Well, if you view the refuge itself, it has structures on it, it has pipes going across it, it's got oil wells and windmills and different things that are already on the property. And of course, it's a sand base anyway, so it's hard to imagine that that would be that destructive to go across the property. And one of the things that, if you look back at our website, you'll see early on in this process, 2016 or 17, Christina, was it, that we offered this augmentation solution, and the response we got back, you can find all that stuff on GMD5's website. And the response back had partially to do with some environmental concerns and meeting the requirements of various environmental laws. But we did a little bit more research internally and found that there are 4 or 5 national preserves across the country that do exactly what we've been proposing and have done so since the enactment of those environmental laws. So we're not giving up with the service. We're going to keep talking to them and hope we can get them to recognize the validity and sensible approach of delivering the water then and there. But we have to keep moving, assuming that we can, because at the end of the day, we've got to satisfy Mr. Barfield and his time schedules as much as we can. Yes?
This is a question for DWR. What is their response to the Audubon letter that said if it's not implemented by this year, they're gonna sue the DWR?
Yeah. There was a response very recently, and the response essentially was that they're going to continue to work with the GMD and believe that because of the statutes related to the LEMAs where he has to approve it as an order, that this accomplishes his administrative requirements, and therefore he's not going to take further action in strict administration of water rights.
Would you go back and explain, about the different years of the water rights groups? Another one to show we got to see. Acre feet. That one. Okay, say you're in group 4,
Yes.
136. Would you explain that? Is that where we're going to be cut to, or is that proposal, or what? I didn't quite follow it.
Sure. The column on the left, or on the right. That is your voluntary use target, assuming you have a 195 certified acre-foot permit within each of these respective groups. Okay, so this is an example of the implementation of these percentages authorized. Okay, if you were to take all of the voluntary use targets within each of these respective groups, the sum total would be these numbers. Does that help at all?
Well, take on the index, not except, go back. Not except for 100%, it's not except 109, I'm using 4, then take it, shut off the end gun, it's not going to reduce 195 acre feet down to 46 acres.
Right. The accounting balance is under 210. Period. We chose to go off authorized. As a result, to get to 210, it's a much more drastic balance act. Yes, John, you have a clarification?
What I think you need to emphasize, that 210 is based on the fact we do nothing. We don't take off end guns, we don't.
Okay, that was my question, that's what I said.
And so, to get to 210, we're saying that if you take off the end guns, and we can figure out a way to save this little extra deal that Barfield wants in the heart of the LEMA, you'll never see that 210 restriction.
But how you get to
But that's
these
how you
targets
get there
is
if we do.
on your, how you do it is you.
If you take the end guns off, you tell me that's not the way.
Let me help here, I think I can help. There's a number missing here, and the number that's missing here is 233,000 acre feet. There it is. Okay, 233,000 acre feet is the amount of use that was being experienced in this basin. DWR has told us, and using the model, that in order to get to that 50% line that I talked about earlier, we have to go from 233 down to 210,000 acre feet. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So 19,000 of that is attributable to income removal. 4,000 of it is the reduction in what we call zone D, or in that greater than 40% area, to get to the 210. And that's essentially what we're trying to do.
So you're telling me if we follow that plan, this plan's not gonna kick in?
us 210, we're done. You don't, nothing else happens. Nobody has to do a thing. None of the other stuff comes into play.
My understanding, they've given us about 5 years, is that right?
Correct.
Then we talk about 68 years now. My concern is, if you want to do the math, 5 years out of 68, my question is, we can see the results. Maybe we can, but if we don't, then we hand it back.
One of the biggest complicating factors here is everybody knows that if you cut everything, you're not going to see an immediate response to stream flow. It's not going to happen, right? We all are aware of that. So the best we can do is use the model to compute what's going to fix over time. And it's going to take longer than 5 years.
But we're going to be hurt by it.
No, because it's not going to be based on what the stream flow actually is. It's going to be based on that 210 number or its equivalent. So as long as we're doing 110, it doesn't matter what's happening at the stream.
Is it confusing? Absolutely.
I thought the problem was the stream.
Not according
Are
to
we
us.
just walking in a circle?
Yeah. Our belief is that stream flow should not be a part of this. It's not part of whether there's an impairment or not. We all have to solve.
Here's what I'd say. I say the whole thing's a very expensive experiment with other people's water. The augmentation would guarantee them their water when they want it, and that's just not reality with the stream flow, never will be. I don't think you can get one board member to say that what you're proposing here will work without augmentation. So why not do the augmentation? Looks like to me Mr. Barfield's getting a rider, stacking it on us so he can have one big ride instead of a couple small rides.
There is not a board member that doesn't believe that augmentation would fix the entire problem. I can tell you that. The comment here is it'd be a lot more efficient also. There is not a board member that doesn't agree with that comment. I'm not farming out here like all you guys are, and I don't get to see the stream all the time. Other people could comment about, or could comment about that better than me.
The comment was while from Hudson to ZNKH, even to Rosnick, to Rivera's boundary, it's 8-9 miles as the crow flies. There are a whole lot more stream miles than that. 20, 22. So, not only that, sandy soils. So delivering water to the stream up toward Hudson, you lose a lot of water in delivering it there. So delivering to their front door, ideally on their front doorstep, is much more economical than trying to deliver it to the stream and having it poof, evaporate or infiltrate down in a sandy soil. Absolutely.
If we're not going to use, so just to clarify, if we're not going to use stream flow, how do we gauge that we've done anything? How do we gauge the impairment?
We have argued that point repeatedly. So it comes to how do you measure success? Arguably, we've got the state in agreement that achieving 210 is success.
Even if the stream doesn't flow?
Correct. Correct.
Sounds like a government program.
Well, here's the other thing to keep in mind. We are not charged with making the stream flow. Period. We are charged with reducing the depletion to the stream into the future. Minor difference, but there is a difference. We're not charged with causing that water table to rise enough for it to start flowing naturally. That's not what we're charged with. We're charged with taking the slope of depletion and kicking it up a notch so that it's not depleting as fast. That's what we're charged with, okay? So, it's not stream flow. Yeah.
What is the difference between, you keep hanging on this model, and the Kansas Geological Survey said there was like 2% depletion. Why is there such a difference?
Ironically, there's not. Reason being,
What's the question?
sure, Kansas Geological Survey says Stanford County is within 1 to 2% of bingo dead on the point of water use. 2% or less water use. Kansas Geological Survey says we're there. Looking at these numbers, I'll get there. These numbers are within 2% of water use. We're in agreement with Kansas Geological Survey. Believe me, when we ran the numbers, balances out, hey, we match up with Kansas Geological Survey. If we do that, I have a whole lot more confidence in these numbers than just using the model. I have a lot of confidence with the model, but balancing out with Kansas Geological Survey as well, that's an independent study looking at how sustainable we are. This balances out with that study as well.
Let me make one other comment about this. And I've often thought about this, and it's going to frustrate all of you when I say it, but if you think about it, we're going through all of this and all of this expense to try to address a 14,000 acre feet water right. What percentage is that of a 195 acre feet single water right that one of you guys operates out there in the real world? 14,000 acre feet a year. And more than that, at the end of the day, all we have to do is come up with 5,000 acre feet to solve the impairment. So all of this is about, what, 5% of one of your water rights authorized use? So it's frustrating. And that's another reason why I think that they should just look at augmentation as the solution, because that's really something that will solve their problem, give them what they need, and it won't destroy. I mean, all of you guys would have to be sitting here. Yes, it's a little bit of cost up front, the capital expense to put in an augmentation field is there. You've had to pay for the model and Blue and me and everything that's had to go into this, and I get it, and I'm frustrated with it. But it seems to me that the solution is pretty evident and pretty easy, and will be much cheaper than the economic impact to all of you if we do cuts. I fought this fight repeatedly, and we're at a spot where PWR is requiring us to do what it's requiring us to do. And there you go.
So, Kevin, you have a question?
Should explain what purchase, transfer, and all the work the water pass trying to do, what it's going to affect that percentage.
Let's say, WaterPack is doing really nice work trying to find money, trying to find grants to buy up rights in the high impact areas and that kind of thing. That all goes to that reduction from 233 down to 210, so it gets us to 210 faster, right? It also, depending on where the water right is purchased, we may not have to get a full 4,000 out of Zone B. So if it's a really highly impactful well, right there on the stream bed, it might not take 4,000. So there's language in the LEMA draft that addresses a hydrologic equivalent, so it meets that criteria. But to the extent funds can be developed to get to that number without having to make cuts, and those grants or donations or whatever is used to repurchase water rights and retire them, that will obviously make a difference in whether cuts are required. So that's one of the efforts that's out there. Getting the money is going to be a big part of this deal. Hopefully lots of people feel generous and give donations, and eliminates the need for a special assessment. So,
Can you tell me what year Pavera was made in National Can you tell me what year Quivira was made a national refuge?
Question is, what year was Quivira National Wildlife Refuge established? 1954? 55? 55.
Has it ever been dry?
Has it ever been dry? Yes,
How many years?
several.
How long has it been?
I can't quantify, but several.
Where the water rights have a quality clause in it? Or does it just say water?
The Quivira Certified Water Rights 7571 have a quality clause in it, or is it just water?
They say what we got quality is the argument.
Right. Okay, so
Does
Let's
it
just
have
go
a
down
limit
to-
tag?
no, there is not a quality clause on 7571. However, if we supply water that destroys habitat or forage for endangered species, you think this is bad? That's an Endangered Species Act violation that we cause. This pales in comparison. I don't want to over dramatize it, but that's my interpretation of it. So yes, we want to try to maintain that quality so we're not causing harm through what we're proposing to do.
But if Joe irrigates with some high saline water or a lot of salt in it, he destroys his crops, that's his problem.
Agreed?
The same as with Quivira, if they got some water they don't like, and it causes a problem, that's their problem.
Well, for devil's advocate again, Ron, if your neighbor were to supply you with water that was higher salt than you wanted and it destroyed your crop, would you go after that person? You better believe it. And that's what we're talking about doing, is someone else supplying water that could potentially devastate their habitat for endangered species. And we're gonna make sure that it doesn't do that.
I would quantify the quality of the water before I push it. And they did.
Right, that's what we're planning to do. We're wanting to qualify the quality of water before it gets delivered, so that it meets and does not destroy.
That's
Absolutely.
after the fact of the permit. They're wanting to quantify quality.
You would like to have a quality of water for your irrigation crops too. You don't want it to be salty. I would guess that you would have KDHE coming out to assess the quality of your groundwater if it was impaired too. I'm just assuming that. My assumption is not probably right.
If you're getting salt in it, you seal off the bottom part where you're picking up the salt. Or
Sorry.
you reduce the pumping.
I missed that again. Sorry.
If you're picking up salt in your water and you're irrigating with it, you cement off the bottom or you or reduce the pumping rate so you don't pick up that salt.
Right, if you're picking up salt in your irrigation system, you modify your system so you don't pick it up anymore, correct? Sure.
But they didn't quantify quality when they were issued their permit. They
Yeah,
just
neither
said water.
did you, is the argument.
Huh?
Neither did you, is the argument. Don, you have a question?
If the Lima plant was implemented, which part of it would be started first? Would it be up the left side or would it be the augmentation?
Yes.
Both of them
Yes.
at the same time?
Yes, if it's implemented, we're gonna start with every phase of it immediately. Sorry, the question was if the Lima plan were implemented today, would it be augmentation today and then some kind of use reduction in the future, voluntary use reduction in the future, or something? No. What stated in the plan would go into effect in its entirety from day zero. John?
Well, you might point out that we're already, on memorandum of understanding for the augmentation cells. We're trying to get the moves finally legal. All these different things, we're working on those in the background. But until we get the state to move over and actually say, here it is, do it. Some of that stuff's not available.
John's point was, we are already moving forward with obtaining a memorandum of understanding with the states for augmentation to make sure that Our responsibilities are very well defined. Their responsibilities are very well defined. We all know who is responsible for what. Same goes for where we can move water to and from. We want to have that very clearly defined so that it's at the point in time in 2025 when we are measuring and doing the accounting for these transfers and moves and retirements, that we can accurately, as best we can, account for every drop of water as much as possible. Okay? So if we can move water out of a very high impact area, retire water out of the high impact area, that is going to go a long way toward achieving the 210 than someone that is 50 miles away retiring their water. The key is impact to stream. But as a whole, we must meet 210.
How did we arrive, what was the criteria for arriving at the 210? If we're not worried about the stream flow, how did we arrive at this magic number of conservation?
So the stream flow is on a declining trend. And what DWR told us was you need to decrease the decline by 50%. So instead of looking like this, it needs to look like that. The model said that in order to do that, to decrease the amount of depletion by 50%, the amount you could take out of the basin on an annual basis is 210,000 acre.
Okay, when the LSD wells went in, they were supposed to be 4 wells to go out. They were stream flowing pretty quick, trying to go that.
You're talking about the MDS wells? Okay, so first of all, MDS really is not in the Groundwater Act. It's part of the problem. But the other reality is they're still getting addressed because they have low priority numbers anyway, right? Because they're the most recent wells. And because they're the most recent wells, when we do the revisions to the LEMA that we're working on, where we look at both impairment and priority, those are going to suffer the biggest cuts anyway, because they're, if they ever have to be cut, because they are low priority wells. And the more low priority they are, with a big impact on the impairment, they're going to have the biggest, most drastic effect. So as a practical matter, they are addressed. We just don't have the ability to just do it by MDS.
Harold.
Yeah, you might discuss if we don't augment what that number is, it's 7210.
Okay. Without augmentation. Without augmentation. Correct me if I misspeak. 150,000. Is that accurate? I'm looking at the DWR folks because this is something we're still going back and forth on. We don't have the documents on it.
I don't have it.
I'm wanting to say off memory, so I can be wrong. Make sure I say that in the public meeting. 150,000 is what is in my memory. That is purely off memory, folks. Okay?
And that's upfront, not.
That is immediate. That is immediate. And permanent, yes.
Well, the other thing you might say, augmentation was put through the legislature by a group of people. It is only available in the Rapid City. We've had a continuous thing in Barfield saying, just go drill the wells and get started. And with no assurance of what he might do to you guys individually. And so we didn't do it for that reason. We had no assurance.
Right. The argument is, why haven't you done augmentation yet? When the legislature clearly said that the stakeholders to be able to put that in, if it's voluntarily offered, to produce the quality, quantity, timeliness of the impaired right. Gross paraphrase of that statute, folks. The reason we haven't done it, we haven't got the folks in Manhattan to nail down that that's adequate for them. So without that memorandum of understanding, we don't know where they're going to go with granting the permits to do it, with granting the well access to do it. And there's a lot of ifs in there that we're not very comfortable with as a district to proceed without some surety that what we're doing is going to be a long-term solution. Hence the need for the Lima plan. Correct.
Texas Lake is an example, and that's all I know. They had a big problem, a lot smaller. And they did, it's exactly what you proposed, and we're spraying that. The state, I can't only, link what we're saying environmental with the same thing, same bird, land up there, a lot of land down there. They work perfect, in fact, they improve. So, I would suggest to the board that they need, I know they're pushing it, to say, hey, it works. Divide it in your legal plan, it is in the legal plan.
Sure. I think we can agree that the statement's comparison with the Texas Lake refuge down in Pratt County.
Yes.
And they did not have enough water, so they drilled wells to supply water for their needs.
And they piped into the
They
area.
piped it to the areas they need, all the things that we've been contemplating for Vera. The key difference, state of Kansas owned refuge, federal refuge. Key difference. The other issue is federal refuge that holds a senior water right. That's a pretty big trump card.
What is that? Give them the right to order this area.
Does that give me right to order the area?
If it works, to be a solution, a good solution if it works. If it worked down there, you guys went up in here and said that it worked up there. Exactly. The only thing I'm hearing is they're dragging your feet on the fruit.
Our very first volume was augmentation. From the very get-go, 2 years ago, we wrote them a letter, you could see it on the website, said, hey, we can fix this for you, let's do augmentation. No. So then we revised our augmentation proposal and made it sweeter. And they said no. And it's always been no. Then we said, Mr. Barfield, you're the one that ultimately has to decide whether this satisfies the impairment or not. Even if the service says no, we can fix the problem for them with augmentation. How about it? No. Well, if you won't take augmentation, what will you take? And it ultimately, through negotiation back and forth and a lot of complaining on our part, was where we are right now. We'll let you do 5,015 CFS well field with a decline in stream flow to 50%, reduction in the decline. That's what we'll accept. So that's where we are. It's not that we don't believe it. We believe it and believed it from the very beginning.
If we create this and decide to keep the Barfield in place, and in 5 years or whatever, we do it, create this, how satisfied, how safe are we?
Sorry, I'm trying to interrupt. The question is, if we get this put in place, and in 5 years we meet the 210, how safe are we from getting a double whammy or something into the future? How safe are we? The answer is, it's an order that would be issued by the chief engineer. He's bound by that too. In the Lima document, it states, if the Lima area meets 210,000 acre feet average in that 5-year period, from 2020 to 2024, keep doing what you're doing, no change to what you've been doing, keep moving forward. It says that verbatim. Paraphrase, that's what it says. And now, make it very clear too. If something in this document is not clear and explicit, I really want comment on that to say this point does not make sense. Can you give clarification to it so that we can redraft that clause to make sure it's very clear to you?
But one other thing I should point out that should be really important, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier. So let's say we go through 5 years and we don't get to the 210 marker that we have to achieve. I have constantly pushed for really permissive language in how we fix the problem. So one of the solutions that DWR is requiring is language in there that says, here's how you have to fix it if you don't come up with something else. But I've kept the language that gives us flexibility that says, okay, let's say we're 1,000 acre feet off. We'll go out and buy another 1,000 acre feet or retire it or whatever so you guys don't be exposed to the cuts. So we're leaving open possibilities of remedying the problem that aren't strictly immediate cuts. We have other alternatives that we can use to try to solve it. So if we get up against it and there's something that is close and there are other solutions that are more palatable and work better for the group, by golly, that's going to be an option for you. And I think that's a huge thing because, again, we're going to get close. I doubt that any of the other stuff's going to happen. I think we can get to the 210 number and everybody's going to be fine. But if we're not and we need to do something else, at least we have options.
If we reach the 210, I mean, my understanding is the reason we're here is because of the services impairment of stream flow, correct?
Of their water.
Not necessarily stream flow per se, but
If they don't get stream flow, how do they get their water? I mean, if only by augmentation.
Right, so
if we meet our limit and we deliver augmentation in the amount that we're proposing in the LEMA, they're not impaired anymore.
And is there wording that that's the end of it?
yes, it becomes
An order, and it's explicit at that point.
AWEP didn't require a reduction in water use, it only required you to retire your end guns. Have you ran numbers to prove whether or not that actually did save water, or is that where you're getting some of your water savings for removing all the end guns?
The statement was referring to AWEP in that 2010-2011 program that producers signed up to voluntarily remove their end gun and permanently reduce their authorized acres on their permit, not modify their certified acre feet. Okay, that's how that program worked. We have run the numbers, and yes, the AWEP program saved water commensurate. That's how we got the 19,000 estimation. Yes.
But be clear, it is an estimation because everybody's got different kind of systems and end guns and all of that. So we had to use some judgment in arriving at what that number might be. So it's not perfect, and there was no mechanism in place either at the state level or in GMV5 to do a perfect measurement of what end gun removal would do. So this is based on the best information that we had, using largely the AWEP.
Sure. The question was regarding the technical definition for end gun and how it's described in the document. Is that accurate, Carol?
We welcome any help for a definition of an end gun. Knock yourself out and send it to us.
But really how we came to that definition in the document was off the AWEP program. That's how it was defined in how we proposed that program, that the most end nozzle cannot be a larger bore size than previous nozzles on the system. That's how that system was, that's how that program was worded, and so we just stole that language. Okay. But yes, if Lynn is correct, if that's not clear, if you see some loopholes in that potentially, send them our way. We want that language too. We're not, I hold no ego to this language. Okay.
What happens if they get paid, GMD tries to get conversation done, DWR service needs us, and that date, 2024 comes together? Will those secondary things kick in?
What if the GMD in good faith with partners, I'll extend that a little bit, pursues augmentation, but there's a roadblock imposed on them via either DWR or the service. What happens? That is our exact concern from day zero. That was our exact concern with, oh, just go out and drill wells. You'll be fine. No, we're pursuing a memorandum of understanding that clearly defines their responsibilities, our responsibilities. So if at some point in the future, we don't have it in place, we have a document to come back to and say, you failed to fulfill this responsibility, and that's why we didn't get it done. Yeah, thank you. I see a lot of folks looking the other way, not wanting to make eye contact. John?
You might explain that basic seahorse shape and the Zone D are a product of Barfield's version of impairment. That's where those maps come from. Because he walked into the meeting and laid it on the table and said, here's what this should look like. That's why Mystery River, the North Fork, and the South Fork got included. Because it's an impairment model. It's not based on water.
Okay. John's point. How did the seahorse even get started? How did that response map get started?
It's what it is a response.
It's a response map. The water rights that show impact to zenith gauge that are shown to impair of some magnitude. Go back to July 2017. In the dates prior to that. We asked the state who, how much, and what's it look like. The who is the seahorse map. That's how that arrives. As the state said, these are the folks that have impact, these are the folks that we would impose strict administration on to solve this as a remedy if it was the chief engineer's requirement, if he was the one putting that remedy in. We did adopt that as our mechanism going forward because, again, it's not just priority, it's also impairment that we're trying to balance here. Okay? So yes, that they go hand in hand.
Another question. Some people, you had another map that shows like 10% increase. How can you, it doesn't make sense for me, and I just go that saying, if I'm less than 10%, around 10%, some guy is 50%, cutting the slopes the same, it's not gonna be a good result.
In the current draft, they are treated, the question was, if I'm at 10% and there's a person that has 50% response, why am I being treated the same as they are? Is that accurate? Okay. Agreement. Yeah, we're working that. I'm not going to go through the slide because it's going to take forever. But those portions that we're looking at right now, that is one of them. That's treating everybody the same, regardless of your response to the stream, does not make sense. And so we're looking to implement that, but at the same time, still respecting priority. Okay, we have to balance those two out. So if you have an idea of how to balance those that you feel is more equitable than what we're looking at, please let us know. We're not closed down to that. We're not locked into how that is crafted. Okay? But yes, we're in agreement, Fred. Yeah, that's kind of shocking, isn't it? Hopefully you guys can see that I am willing to stay here and answer any questions as much as we can. We've been here 2 hours working through these questions and answers. It's not to stop. We want feedback. We want communication. We want you to talk to the LEMA committee. We want you to talk to your board members. Please have input into how this is crafted. That's critical. I cannot emphasize that enough. We spent 2 hours. I think We see folks heading toward the doors. I think that, right, Dr. Lynn?
I just want to say one final thing. Thank you all for your patience and asking the questions you're asking. I grew up in a community not much different than the ones around here, and I know that the coffee shop has a lot of information, and not all of it is accurate all the time. So rather than listen to the coffee shop gossip, give that man right there a call and tell you what the scoop is. And I think everybody would be better served rather than have misinformation being passed out. We certainly want you all to know what we're doing. Nobody's trying to hide anything here. We want something that works for everybody. And to be frank, it's no different than I tell all the people that work with me every day. I mean, we don't have the market on good ideas. And so we like good ideas from anybody that has them. So bring them on. We'll consider them and try to work them into the mix. But we're trying really hard to get something that works and get this over with. So thank you all very much for your willingness to ask the question.
Thank you, folks, for your attendance and input tonight. It's invaluable. Have a good night.